latest data on jobs from the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy indicates the unemployment in India may be at a two-year high at 7.2%. At the same time, labor participation, that is the proportion of the population looking for work, has also been falling. The report explains that at the core of the problem are fewer job opportunities, which in turn lead to lower wages. To understand the magnitude of the unemployment, I'm joined now by Mahesh Vyas, a CEO and Managing Director of CMIE. Mr. Vyas, welcome to the show and thank you for speaking with us here at Bloomberg Quint. I want to start by asking you, of course, CMIE has been tracking unemployment since 2016. In your report, you say that the concerning trend is in all of 2018, you see a drop in employment when you compare with each month in 2017. The nearly 3 years or 2.5 years that you have and which you now have been tracking.
(2018) was the worst. So we did see a fall in job opportunities from 2016 November, that's after demonetization. So 2017 was bad, but 2018 was much worse than that. So there's a steep decline in employment and in the employment ratio. So we are seeing large-scale discouraged unemployment, which means people who came to the labor market, tried to get a job, did not find one, tried for some more time, and then gave up. So when they give up, they leave the labor market. They don't even call themselves unemployed. They just say, we are not in the labor market. We're not looking for jobs anymore. There ain't any on offer anyway. And that is the most distressful part. That's what shows up in the low and falling labor participation rate. So I think the situation is pretty grim.
You also talk about, the dreadful phenomenon. Your report says the dreadful phenomenon of falling labor participation rate and rising unemployment rates have been seen. Can you explain why this is happening and why this is so concerning?
So it's concerning because the unemployment rate is rising on a falling labor participation rate. What this means is that lesser people in proportion terms are coming into the labor markets. Now, even these lesser proportion of people coming into the labor market are increasingly not finding jobs. So if there was a big rush of people coming into the labor markets and then you don't find jobs, it is understandable that the jobs on offer are not keeping up with the rush of people coming into the labor markets. But what we are seeing over here is the rush is declining, and yet we are not seeing even the reduced rush finding jobs in equal measure. So a reduced rush is being welcomed by a higher unemployment rate. Now that's bad of both worlds. That's what is very distressing. So we require A, to see the unemployment rate decline, and B, see the labor participation rate go up. We require more hands to the oar. We require more people to work. We require more people to pedal the economy into a more meaningful growth rate. And these people need to get better wages. So we seem to be slipping on all fronts. Lesser people coming to lend their hand to the growth process. And even those who are coming are not finding enough jobs.
I just want to ask you a bit more about the lower or the falling labor force participation. And this has been a subject of quite a bit of discussion in the recent past outside of the CMIE data as well. The theory behind it, as you explained, is that lesser and lesser people are looking for jobs because there aren't enough jobs out there. But how do you juxtapose that with a real life situation where if someone is unemployed, they would still continue to look for jobs? Just giving up would not be an option. And in what circumstances do they really, in a real life scenario, move out of the labor force completely and just quit looking for a job?
So a lot of the people who have worked in the labor markets in India for long understand unemployment in India essentially a phenomena of the relatively well-off people, which implies that the poorer people or the bottom of the pyramid cannot afford unemployment, and they are always employed no matter how miserable the jobs be in which they are engaged. So unemployment is a phenomena of the upper crust. Now, if this is the case, we are seeing people getting enrolled into educational institutions in a larger way. There are more graduates coming out now. So the upper sections of society, so to say, have increased in number. They are not finding the jobs. But what happens to them is they look for jobs for some time, then they get discouraged that there ain't enough jobs and they fall back. These are the people who can afford to remain unemployed. Now, we have seen, and we are gathering more data on this. In a few months, we'll be able to get a better handle on this. But it looks like that a lot of transfer payments are helping people to remain unemployed. So when you have state governments giving out doles, which could be unemployment doles that the Congress has promised in states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, or it could be the kind of transfers the government of Telangana is doing, for example, or in some of the other southern states, you're getting these transfers from the government for distressed parts. Even waiver of loans is what can help a household say that we have got this debt, we do not have to repay it, which means a little more cash in hand, which means we can stay unemployed. So I think there are many reasons, and we need to dig the reasons in a systematic way. Anecdotal evidence seems to suggest that a lot of government transfers to households in many ways is dissuading people to participate in the labor markets.
Okay, so that may be putting a downward pressure on labor force participation, but what about wages? You have also talked in the report about the trend of wages and how, with a lack of jobs also comes a depression in wage rates. Can you elaborate on that?
So when you have a lot of people looking for jobs, getting discouraged and going back, it means that the supply of people into the labor markets is way high compared to the number of jobs on offer. If we have not seen investments rate pick up since 2011-12, it's a very long time. If there is no increase in the investment rate, then the jobs on offer are not going to increase. So we have seen stagnation in jobs on offer, and we have seen some increase in the labor coming into the labor market. So when this happens, the only thing that can kind of solve the equation is for wages to come down. If wages go down, then more people can get jobs at those lower wages. So one has seen the excess supply of labor compared to the jobs on offer depress wages.
You know, recently there was this whole controversy over NSSO data, which was leaked and published in a leading financial paper, which suggested that the country's unemployment rate stood at a 45-year high at 6.1% in 17-18. After that, the government dismissed the authenticity of that data, said it was an interim report, etc., etc. What do you make of all of the controversy and all of the debate really about the authenticity of data out there, and specifically about the NSSO report?
So I think it's very unfortunate that the government did not release, or it stopped the release of that data. I think that data is very valuable. It is very important that the report does get released. All that we can see from here is that the stopping of that report by the government indicates that there is a lot of stress in the labor markets, to an extent that the government felt compelled to withhold that data. Although the data was signed off by the National Statistical Commission, the government thought it is too troublesome. It's against the narrative that the government believes in, and therefore they withheld it. Now, mind you, that report said that the unemployment rate is 6.1%. At that time, for that same period, our comparable numbers around 5.8%. And that 5.8% has today gone up to 7.2%. So the situation is getting from bad to worse, and the government is saying we don't believe it. If the government says we don't believe it, if they don't believe CMIE's numbers, which is a private organization, I can say, okay, that's understandable. But their own report through an agency which is under them and has for decades produced such numbers, then I think we are only running away from the facts. And if you run away from the facts, we can't solve the problem.
You know, you speak in your report about how the current situation on jobs will lead to political pressure, which in turn will lead to social unrest. And I think that's a very important statement in the context of what we are seeing right now. Recently in Parliament, in fact his last speech in Parliament, the Prime Minister sort of dismissed a lot of the reports that are out there. He cited EPF numbers to talk about how, in his view, unemployment is not an issue. Do you think that there is a political necessity to depress any kind of news or reportage out there on unemployment?
It appears the government feels that there's a need to control the narrative because it may be that it strongly believes that there isn't a problem. They probably believe that there are enough jobs on offer and there isn't any problem of unemployment in the country, and numbers put out by CMIE and NSSO are misleading. I think they are ill-advised if they believe so. It's important for the government to recognize the problem and also recognize, like I have indicated in my last piece, is that when you see farmers coming out to protest on the street, that should be called social unrest. When you see those Jats of northern India or the Gujars of northern India or the Kapus in Andhra Pradesh, etc., or the Marathas in Maharashtra agitating, it is social unrest. One doesn't have to make it worse. One doesn't have to have riots on the streets to say I then recognize that there is social unrest. If there are agitations asking for reservations, it is a reflection of the labor market stress. If there are agitations to say that our loans should be waived, it is a reflection of the wages depression. So we have a serious problem on hand, and there is on display social unrest. We don't have to wait for this to get worse for us to actually take cognizance of that. So I think we have a problem on hand. The government needs to recognize it, and it needs to actually intervene to solve the problem.
The counter to that, and part of what the Prime Minister said in his speech in the Lok Sabha, is that the informal sector gives 85 to 90% jobs. And you know, a lot of the data out there is about the formal sector of employment. Do you think that there is a mismatch there, and do you think there's enough coverage of this informal sector of which there is very little record?
The point made over there is completely misplaced. It's based on misinformation. The NSSO survey and the CMI survey are both household surveys. Now, anyone who is working in the has got an informal job or is working in the unorganized sector, is driving a truck or an Ola car or is frying pakoras on the street, all of them live in households. So unless they're living in trees or on tree tops, they're all covered. They're covered by NSSO and they're covered by CMI. So there is no case at all to say that these surveys do not cover the unorganized sector. So long as the people live in households, they live in houses, we do cover all of them. All kinds of people live in houses, and this is a household survey, not an enterprise survey. That's what is wrong with the EPFO data, not with the CMI data, not with the NSSO data.
Yeah, the interesting reference there to frying pakoras as well as Ola, Uber. I'm going to push you for one more question, Mr. Vyas, and answer as you see fit. You know, we are 2 months away from an election. And right now, as of this point, I can't speak for the future, the biggest election issue all of a sudden seems to have become national security, which is an important issue. Do you think that there has been a collective failure of the political class to highlight how big an issue the jobs is, or the lack of jobs is, some of it which is reflected in the data that you've put out today?
I think the political class has not highlighted the jobs issue adequately. and there are too many distractions away from it, I think it's important for the entire political class to take cognizance of this problem and apply their minds to resolving it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mahesh Vyas, for speaking with us on this jobs data. Worrying data is what the Managing Director and CEO of CMIE tells us, and also speaks about the need for the political class to focus on jobs before the elections around the corner.